Tonight, Hollywood saw something no one expected. Clint Eastwood broke down on national television after a confrontation so intense that Jimmy Kimmel had to stop the show and apologize in the middle of the moment. The energy in the studio shifted in seconds. Viewers went from laughing to holding their breath because no one had seen Clint lose his composure like this before. The cameras caught every second. The shock, the silence, and the look on Kimmel's face when he realized he had pushed too far. What happened on that stage created a wave through Hollywood, and people behind the scenes said the tension did not end when the cameras cut. It only grew stronger. We are about to break down exactly how everything fell apart, why this moment hit so hard, and what it means for both men moving forward. Before we unpack the full chaos, hit subscribe because this is the one breakdown you will want to revisit. Clint Eastwood walked onto the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage with the calm confidence people expect from him. The audience gave him a warm welcome because he is one of the few actors whose presence alone fills a room. Clint smiled and waved, but the energy felt slightly off from the start. There was a small stiffness in his shoulders and a slower step than usual. People watching at home might not have caught it, but those in the studio knew something was different. Kimmel tried to keep things light because that is his style. He likes to pull big laughs and guide conversations in a relaxed way. Clint usually handles that energy well, but this time he looked more guarded. It felt like he was preparing for questions he did not want to answer. Kimmel opened with a joke about Clint's long career, which normally would have landed well, but Clint did not fully lean into it. His smile looked polite instead of natural. The crowd laughed, but the timing felt slightly delayed. It was the kind of moment where you sense tension building even if you cannot explain why yet. Kimmel noticed it too, and he started shifting in his chair because he could tell Clint was not fully comfortable. There had already been talk online that Clint was irritated about recent comments Kimmel made about older directors. Fans speculated that Clint took those comments personally. So the anticipation for this interview was higher than usual. Kimmel probably thought he could smooth things over with humor, but Clint came in with a firm presence that suggested he was ready to defend himself if needed. The setup felt like the start of something unpredictable, and both men knew they were walking into a conversation that could turn sharp at any moment. Kimmel leaned forward in his chair and tried to shift the mood with a bolder question. He asked Clint if he felt he was too old to keep directing action films. The words landed with a thud. The room went quiet for a second because everyone knew that question was loaded. Clint lifted his head slowly and gave Kimmel a steady stare. His jaw tightened just enough to show that the question did not sit well. He kept his voice calm, but there was a hard edge in it when he said that age does not decide a person's ability to create good work. The audience gave a small nervous laugh, but it faded quickly when Clint did not join in. Kimmel tried to brush it off like a harmless joke, but the timing was off and the energy dipped even lower. He pushed again and asked if Clint ever worried about being out of touch with modern Hollywood. That was the moment the tension became clear to everyone watching. Clint shifted in his seat and crossed his arms. His eyes narrowed just slightly, enough to show that he felt cornered. The audience looked uncomfortable because it felt like Kimmel was poking at something personal instead of keeping the conversation friendly. Clint answered slowly because he wanted to choose his words carefully. He said that he had seen enough in his career to know when a question was meant to get a rise out of him. That line drew a sharp reaction from the room. Some people clapped, some stayed quiet, and a few looked toward Kimmel to see how he would handle it. The whole space felt tight because the balance between humor and respect was clearly slipping. Kimmel laughed, but the laugh sounded forced. He tried to lean into the joke again by saying he was only asking what people online were already saying. Clint did not smile. Instead, he kept his eyes on Kimmel and waited for the next move. That silence made the audience shift in their seats because it was clear this was no longer a playful exchange. If you are watching this breakdown, make sure you hit subscribe because more shocking Hollywood moments are coming. Clint leaned back in his chair and let the silence hang for a moment. Then he looked Kimmel straight in the eye and asked if he actually had any real questions prepared or if he was only trying to get attention by taking shots at his age. The audience reacted with a mix of surprise and nervous laughter, but Clint did not smile. He kept his voice steady and clear, which made the moment feel heavier than anything that had come before it. Kimmel sat up straighter and tried to play it off with a grin, but the grin faded almost as soon as it appeared because Clint was not giving him any space to turn it into a joke. Kimmel tried to steer things back to safer ground by asking Clint about his latest project, but Clint did not follow that lead. He kept pressing. He asked Kimmel why he was so focused on trying to make him look outdated when his work still pulled strong numbers and won awards. The tone of the conversation shifted fast. The crowd sensed it and people started glancing at each other because the interview was no longer light entertainment. Clint was challenging Kimmel on air, and nothing about it felt scripted. Kimmel tried to regain control by making a small joke about being a comedian, but Clint cut him off before he could finish. He told Kimmel that being a comedian does not give him the right to talk down to people who have been shaping the industry longer than he has been on television. That line landed with real weight. The audience fell quiet again because they could hear the frustration in Clint's voice. It was not anger for show. It sounded personal. Kimmel tried to shift in his seat and bring back the familiar late-night energy, but it was not working. Every time he tried to lighten the mood, Clint gave him another firm answer that went against the flow of the show. The interview felt like it was slipping away from Kimmel, and he knew it. He kept trying to pull the conversation back to a comfortable place, but Clint had already taken control. The balance on the stage had flipped, and Kimmel could not pull it back no matter how hard he tried. The moment everything snapped came right after Kimmel tried one more time to soften the tension with a light question about Clint's work style. He said it in a joking tone, asking if Clint ever forgets things on set because of his age. The joke was meant to sound harmless, but it hit at the worst possible time. Clint's face tightened, and he leaned forward slowly, almost like he wanted to make sure every person in the room heard what he was about to say. He looked straight at Kimmel and said, "I forget nothing. What I do remember is who respects the work and who hides behind jokes when they run out of real questions." The line came out calm and controlled, but it cut through the room with a sharp edge. The audience gasped because they had never seen Clint speak to a host like that on live television. The shift in the air was immediate. People stopped moving, stopped whispering, and waited for Kimmel to respond. Kimmel tried to laugh it off. He opened his mouth, ready to force out another line to steer the moment back into safe territory, but Clint did not give him the chance. He kept talking, saying, "If you want to have a real conversation, then speak to me like a director, not like a punchline." The words landed so hard that some people in the front row actually leaned back in their seats. A few looked around as if they could not believe they had just heard it. Kimmel's face changed. The smile dropped. His eyes widened for a second before he tried to pull himself together, but the damage was already done. He shifted in his chair, cleared his throat, and reached for his note cards even though he had no idea what to do with them. The cards shook slightly in his hand. He tried to speak, but Clint raised his hand and said, "No, let me finish." The room froze again. Clint said that he had spent decades building films, training actors, and shaping stories. He said that he had no interest in sitting on a stage only to be treated like someone who had outlived his value. The intensity in his voice made the studio feel smaller. You could almost hear the cameras humming. The crowd stayed silent because no one wanted to be the person who broke the tension. Kimmel had no comeback. He blinked a few times and tried to regain his usual rhythm, but the conversation had slipped completely out of his control. The confrontation had exploded in front of everyone, and there was no clear path back to a normal interview. The room felt like it was holding its breath, waiting to see what Clint would say next and how Kimmel would handle a moment that had already spiraled far past anything the show expected. The emotional crack came when Kimmel, trying to push the conversation back toward humor, made a remark about Clint's most recent box office numbers. He said it with a smile, but the words landed like a punch. Clint's eyes narrowed, and his jaw tightened as if the words had physically struck him. His hands, which had been resting calmly on his knees, clenched slightly. The audience could feel the tension rising. There was a weight in the room that no one could ignore. Even the crew behind the cameras leaned forward because the energy had shifted in a way that was almost uncomfortable to witness. Clint's body language changed further as he straightened in his chair, his shoulders stiffening. His fingers tapped the armrest lightly at first, then more insistently. He kept his eyes fixed on Kimmel, but they were not just looking at him. They were piercing through the layers of the host's jokes and directly into the intentions behind them. The air in the studio grew heavy. Every laugh or cough from the audience felt out of place. It was the kind of tension that makes a live audience hold its breath, and the cameras captured every second. Then Clint spoke, and his voice wavered slightly despite the controlled tone he tried to maintain. He said that he had poured his life into every film he made, that every decision had been about the story, the craft, and the people he worked with. He said that turning his work into fodder for jokes felt like a personal attack. As he spoke, his eyes glistened and his lips trembled. The stoicism he was known for began to falter, and the audience saw a vulnerability that no one had expected from a man of his reputation. The moment hit viewers harder because it was real. Clint did not raise his voice or lash out. He did not storm off the stage. Instead, the crack appeared quietly in his composure. It was in the slight tremor of his hands, the hesitation before he spoke, and the way his eyes momentarily darted away before returning to Kimmel. The raw human emotion, paired with the respect people had for his legendary career, made the audience feel the weight of the moment. People at home saw not just a celebrity under pressure, but a man confronting criticism in a way that was both personal and deeply human. The cameras caught every subtle shift, every micro-expression, and it made the viewers realize just how powerful and unexpected the breakdown truly was. Kimmel's first reaction was a tight-lipped smile, the kind that looks confident from the outside but hides something else underneath. He leaned forward and tried to make a joke, hoping to lighten the mood and regain control of the conversation. His words sounded practiced, but the timing was off because Clint was not laughing. Every attempt to steer the moment back to comedy only made the tension more obvious. Kimmel's usual ease on stage was gone, replaced by a flicker of worry behind his eyes that the audience could almost sense. The smile remained, but it no longer reached his eyes. Behind the scenes, producers were already shifting in their seats and signaling to each other. Their headsets buzzed constantly as they whispered urgently, trying to figure out how to handle the situation without letting it explode further. Some gestured toward Kimmel, urging him to move to safer territory, but he seemed caught between wanting to keep the show on track and needing to respond to Clint's sharp words. Every failed attempt at humor added more weight to the room, and the live audience began to feel the uncertainty as well. Kimmel's body language changed too. He shifted in his chair, his hands gripping the edges slightly as he spoke, and occasionally glanced down at his notes even though they did not provide a solution. There was a sense of visible regret and fear of backlash, the kind of tension that comes when a host realizes he has pushed too far in front of millions of viewers. Each smile and laugh was measured, almost nervous as he tried to maintain the image of control. But it was clear that control had already slipped. The cameras captured every subtle shift, and the audience sensed the unease behind the performance. The producers whispered again, and the energy on set felt like it could snap at any moment, leaving everyone waiting to see whether Kimmel could pull the interview back or if the confrontation would spiral completely out of control. After the tense exchange, the show continued, but the energy in the studio had shifted completely. The audience was quiet, unsure whether to laugh, clap, or just sit in stunned silence. Every movement on stage felt heavier. Kimmel cleared his throat and tried to move the conversation along, but the words sounded rehearsed and forced. The usual rhythm of the show was gone, replaced by a tight, uneasy atmosphere. The cameras lingered on Clint, who was sitting straighter now but still carried the weight of the confrontation in his shoulders and eyes. Kimmel finally broke the silence with an apology. He said that he had not intended to push too far and that he respected Clint's incredible career. The words were carefully chosen, but the tone carried a sense of panic because it was clear he realized the segment had gone off the rails. The audience reacted with polite murmurs, some nodding, others still silent. Kimmel's smile returned briefly, but it lacked its usual warmth. He was doing everything he could to regain control without further escalating the tension, and every second felt like a delicate balance. Clint attempted to finish the segment, but it was not easy. His responses were clipped and careful. Every sentence required visible effort, and he occasionally paused as if collecting himself. His hands remained tense, resting on the desk, and his eyes flicked toward the cameras more than once. The weight of the earlier confrontation lingered, making every word feel like a test of composure. The audience watched closely, sensing that this was not just an interview, but a moment that revealed a side of Clint rarely seen. The show moved forward, but the energy remained strained, leaving a lasting impression that this was a confrontation no one would forget anytime soon. As soon as the cameras stopped rolling, the tension on set did not disappear. Crew members whispered to each other in low tones, sharing what they had seen and speculating about what had just happened. Producers hurried between cameras and monitors, checking angles and making sure nothing had been missed, but the energy remained thick and uneasy. One assistant was overheard saying that they had never seen Clint so shaken in decades of Hollywood work. The words hung in the air, and everyone seemed to feel the weight of the confrontation even off camera. Clint did not linger. He stood slowly, adjusted his jacket, and walked toward the exit with a deliberate, measured pace. His steps were firm but heavy, showing the strain of the encounter. A few assistants followed at a discreet distance, making sure he reached his car safely while trying not to crowd him. Cameras from the press outside were already catching glimpses of him leaving, but Clint kept his focus forward, not engaging with anyone or saying more than necessary. His face was composed, but the tension in his shoulders and the subtle tremor in his hands betrayed the emotional toll of the interview. It was clear that this was more than just a tough segment. It had shaken him deeply. Meanwhile, Kimmel retreated to a private area backstage, away from the cameras and audience. He leaned against a wall and exhaled slowly, his usual confidence replaced by a mix of relief and nervousness. Staff members quietly briefed him on how the footage looked and what might trend online, but his focus was inward, processing how far the interview had spiraled. His team tried to reassure him, but he remained tense, knowing that public reaction could be unpredictable and that the incident would dominate headlines. The contrast between Clint's silent, measured exit and Kimmel's private, anxious reflection underscored how volatile the night had become, leaving everyone involved aware that this confrontation would not be forgotten anytime soon. The moment clips of the confrontation hit social media, the reaction was immediate and intense. Fans across platforms shared the video, replaying the moment Clint's composure cracked and analyzing every word Kimmel said. Hashtags related to the incident began trending within minutes. Twitter and X threads filled with debates, some defending Clint's dignity and calling out Kimmel's approach, while others applauded the host for pushing boundaries. The clips spread quickly, racking up millions of views as people around the world watched the legendary actor in a way they had never seen before. Celebrities also began weighing in, adding fuel to the conversation. Some actors and directors expressed concern for Clint, sharing personal stories about his dedication and artistry. Others joked lightly about the tension but made sure to acknowledge the emotional weight of the moment. Posts and comments from fellow Hollywood figures brought credibility to the conversation, showing that what happened on stage resonated deeply within the industry. The divide was clear, and the discussion spilled into late-night talk shows, entertainment news and online forums. Headlines and major outlets highlighted the clash and the emotional fallout. Some criticized Kimmel for being too aggressive, suggesting that live television had turned into a spectacle at the expense of a respected icon. Others focused on Clint's vulnerability, noting that even the toughest figures have moments of human emotion. Every article and post dissected the event, creating a mix of outrage, sympathy, and fascination. The public reaction made it clear that the confrontation was more than a TV segment. It had become a cultural moment. Everyone had an opinion, and the debate showed no signs of slowing down, making the night's chaos a topic that would dominate Hollywood conversations for days to come. This confrontation will likely leave a mark on Clint Eastwood's legacy, but not in the way many might assume. Eastwood has always been seen as unshakable, the embodiment of Hollywood grit and mastery. Seeing him vulnerable on live television reminded audiences that even legends are human. It added a new layer to his story, showing that his dedication and pride in his craft run deep, and that he will defend it fiercely. While some might criticize the moment as a lapse, many viewers connected with his honesty and the raw emotion he displayed, giving his legacy a human, relatable dimension. For Jimmy Kimmel, the fallout is more complicated. He showcased his skill in steering a live audience, but the backlash also highlighted the fine line between tough interviewing and cruelty. Some praised his ability to provoke a genuine reaction, while others questioned the ethics of pushing someone to tears on air. The segment will likely become a defining moment of his career, remembered both for ratings and for controversy, reminding hosts everywhere that live television carries both power and responsibility. This moment reflects broader Hollywood culture today, where live reactions and viral clips shape public perception instantly. It is a world where reputation, legacy, and personal image are constantly scrutinized and debated online. The incident illustrates the high stakes of celebrity interactions and the intense pressure of performing under public eyes, showing that even icons are not untouchable. If you want more no-filter breakdowns like this one, hit subscribe now because moments like this are rare, and the stories behind them are even more fascinating.